Hello. So my name is Diana, and I was having a discussion the other day with my granddaughter Giovanna, and we started discussing a little bit about our different experiences in our second language learning when we were going to school. Well, she's still in school, but when I was going to school, I had to really sit and think back for a while to remember the ways and the techniques in which we were being taught. So some interesting things came back to me, and it seems like the teaching focused primarily on the audio type of teaching methods. For example, we had a TV rolled into the room, and we would all sit up and look at this woman who I do believe may have been Parisian and not Quebecois, and she would say things. She would say sentences in French, and she would tell us, écoutez, and then she would say répétez, and she would pause while all of us kids in the classroom would repeat what she had said. And this was the only language instruction I remember in my early primary years was this method of repetition, which was extremely passive, due primarily to the fact that we didn't even have a teacher. We were very passive as students, but even more so with the absence of a human being that we could actually ask questions to, or she wasn't even able to correct our pronunciation, obviously not being present in the room at all. The other program I remember, which worked pretty much the same way but seemed to be a little more progressive, was Chez Hélène. Was a woman, a Quebecois woman, actually named Helen Barégian. Pardon my mispronunciation. So she was a Quebecois folklorist and singer, and she created a program called Chez Hélène. And it consisted of a younger woman who was Anglophone that would converse with her, and Hélène would respond in French. So although we were still very passive and the teaching was primarily audio, we were expected to figure out what the conversation was about within the context of the English text and, the French text. And there was a little puppet mouse called Susie on this show, and we would sometimes in the grade school in our primary classrooms watch Chez Hélène as well. So again, it was an extremely passive experience. It was a nice attempt on Hélène's part to, and it did actually make a little bit more sense, but still remained very passive and with the absence of a teacher that we could count on to clarify things for us. I have a feeling that many of my teachers at this time did not speak French at all, and that would explain a lot of the reason why they were relying so heavily on the television. And then things moved on from there. I had a very, very positive experience in a experimental project that happened in the 70s, where we had 100% French immersion, and I actually repeated grade 6 in order to do this. So the focus was on the language instruction and not on the academic instruction, because they considered we had already passed it. So that was a lot of fun. It was 100% immersion. It didn't really matter what we were doing as long as we were speaking in French. However, it wasn't very practical, and when I moved on into the next year, that dropped down to 50%, I believe. I started having trouble with the academic side of things and had to drop out. So back into a primarily English high school with the French instruction, what we were doing at this point, which was very, very traditional and seems to be very much harkens to the grammar method. We were very passive yet again. We sat and we copied the verbs that were put on the chalkboard. Because I was in Quebec, the language of instruction was always in French. We always spoke French in class. However, we very rarely spoke. The students didn't speak. If we did have to speak to our teacher, we did address him in French. But and he always spoke to us in French, but that was about it. We were extremely passive, very quiet, copying grammar. We did speak French at times by standing in front of the room and reading from the French newspaper. So it almost sounds like the old style when they were introducing these ideas directly from the idea of learning Latin in schools. So very archaic. However, I did bump into the direct method of teaching, not in French class, in Spanish class in high school. And I had a progressive teacher there who was doing very interesting things for me at the time. We were participating a lot more. We were speaking Spanish in class. We were expected to speak Spanish in class. However, we were much more engaged by asking questions and by interacting with each other. I do recall sitting in a circle at times and conversing with one another. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of culture introduced. There were a lot of pictures in the room. There was a lot of references to Mexico and to cuisine and ways of life in Mexico. And so for me, the direct method became a very refreshing change from what I had been used to and instructed in. Unfortunately, I didn't really experience the direct method of teaching for my second language, which was French, until long after high school, until I was taking other classes. And then it felt more like what was happening in my Spanish class in high school. And of course, I couldn't understand for the life of me why we weren't following the same method of teaching in the French language classroom. So that covers pretty much my experience in my second language learning, the type of teaching instruction that was going on back at this time. And as you could see, the direct method was, it was a positive experience for me. So hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and you will be hearing soon from my granddaughter, Giovanna. Bye.